Hello, my name is Sandy Adomaitis, the social media director for the Page International Screenwriting Awards, and your host for the Writers Hangout, a podcast that celebrates the many stages of writing, from inspiration to the first draft, revising, getting a project made, and everything in between. We'll talk to the best and the brightest in the entertainment industry and create a space where you can hang out, learn from the pros, and have fun. Hey, writers, it's Sandy. Do we have a special treat for you today? Actor, writer, and voice actor Claudette Wells is here to discuss her new book, Fine French Dogs. You may know Claudette from her roles as Peggy from A Different World and the iconic sitcom Square Pegs, in which she starred alongside Sarah Jessica Parker. Claudette was on the Hangout previously, where we discussed a unique group she and I are a part of called Dead Mother's Day. Listen to episode 16 for the 411 on that. I promise you it is a good thing. Writers, buckle up as Claudette Wells dives deep and takes us through the wild journey that is Fine French Dogs. Let's start the show. Claudette Wells, thank you for joining us on the Writers Hangout.
It's my pleasure, Sandy. I'm so thrilled that you invited me.
Claudette, can I tell you how proud I am of you? I loved reading Fine French Dogs. I love that my friend wrote this book. I just am so proud of you. I have to just praise you.
I am grinning from ear to ear. I'm so happy. I choked up.
Can you please tell the writers out there about Fine French Dogs?
Yes, it's diverse, it's sexy, it's Paris, it's the French countryside. It's a heroine's journey from what she has known all her life, having started in Hollywood as a child actor before she could basically even talk, until she's 35 years old. And she leaves what she knows and goes on a journey that changes her life.
The lead's name is Antoinette, and
Yes.
she is seeking throughout this book.
Yes, it is a heroine's journey. She is seeking. And the characters in the book are all seeking. And the point of the story is that it's only through knowing yourself that it can really connect with another and love. And either we are brave enough to make that journey into knowing ourselves and loving another, or we're not, and how that can play out in our lives. I had an idea for the story, and I didn't know it was going to be a romance, first of all. So when it was a romance, I was shocked. And I thought, it's a romance? I don't even read romance. What are you saying to me, book? And then it kept evolving into this romance. And then there was sex. I thought, what? Sex? Oh, she likes it. Oh, it's important to her. It's a value. Oh, it's really important in her life, the connection. And as I was writing it, I remember one day I was writing and my husband came home. I didn't have a door to my writing space, but I heard him come in the front door and I was writing this erotic scene and I slammed my computer like he was going to catch me watching porn. And it's not pornographic because it's not pornographic. And it is all consenting adults and in different situations. And this is what it wanted to be. So it turned out to be an erotic romance with some depth.
How did you come up with the title, Fine French Dogs?
We have a saying in the States. People in other countries don't say it that I know of. I mean, my English friends I know in France and my English friends here, they don't have this phrase, fine French wine. But we say that in America.
Oh.
And so, yes, I thought, well, we know it in America. I wrote it's a very American story, even though a lot of it takes place in France. And so I thought, well, people they know the phrase fine French wine, and there are dogs involved in the story that are very involved with one of the main characters' background. However, I thought, well, people like French things. Some people like French things. Some people like dogs. And maybe it'll grab their attention. And it flows trippingly off the tongue. And it's a little bit intriguing and mysterious.
It does. It is mysterious. What was your research like for Fine French Dogs?
I didn't have a title. Anne Lamott has a book called Bird by Bird, and she's well loved in the writing community and elsewhere, and much, much respected. She said, I always call my first draft Shitty First Draft. And that's the title I wrote it under.
Oh, really?
I did, because it took the pressure off. And when I finally sent it to the editor I hired, because this is an independent book and I don't have a publisher, so I had to hire an editor, I put the title in. And so I wrote the entire book without the title. It's easy to write that.
Yeah, very smart. Also in Bird by Bird, her brother waited to the last minute to do a school report on birds. We all know that feeling of sitting at the kitchen table, the light is draining from the sky, and you really want to just go watch something on TV, but you've now got to write this book report. And the little boy was just having a meltdown, and he just didn't know how he was going to get it done. And the father said, son, we're just going to go
Bird by Bird. Thank you, Annie Lamott. So the question, did I get off track?
For your research before you started writing.
Yes. So I researched as I wrote. I knew Paris very well. I knew the acting world very well.
Yes. Now, writing can be an emotionally draining journey and stressful. Do you have any tips for aspiring writers?
Be gentle with yourself. That's a motto that I go by. And, be as kind to yourself as you would to a friend you love who's going through something, or your child whom you love who's going through something. Be gentle with that same gentleness applied to yourself. The next thing is take breaks. And I know it's a challenge, especially in our culture, in America, to take breaks. Breaks are necessary and valid and allow for the brain and the system to calm down and to download whatever else is next. So take breaks. And feeling the emotions is worth it. I wrote this down because other people have asked me about emotions. Because if you feel it, there's a chance others will too. I heard Quincy Jones when he was being interviewed that when he was working on the Thriller album, he was the producer with Michael Jackson and all the other team. He said, no one ever knows how their work will be received. In the meantime, make the thing, listen to what you've made. And in the case of writers, read it out loud, And he said, if you feel it, there's a greater chance someone else will. He said, no matter how many times when they were selecting which songs were going to go on Thriller and which ones weren't, and how to edit the songs and so on, he said, whenever I got chills, it stayed in. If I didn't get chills, not necessarily stay in. And he said, no matter how many times I listened to those ones that we chose for Thriller, I had chills. And he said, and I thought, if I have chills, someone else is going to have chills, because I've listened to it 1,000 times. So what I did, I remembered that interview and I went with it. And then when I was reading what I had written, if I cried, sometimes I bawled my eyes out a couple of times. I wrote something and I went over to my husband and I said, this happened. And he goes, well, you decided that. I said, I don't care. It happened and it has to happen. It was sad. It was really sad. And I thought, I'm crying this much. Somebody else might have a tear or their eyes might fill up, because it wasn't to be manipulative. It was to show that emotions are universal. And now, no matter how many times I read any of those sections of the books that made me laugh out loud or cry, I still laugh out loud and I still cry.
Can you read a section of Fine French Dogs for us?
Sure. I'd be very happy to. Thank you for asking. Chapter 7. It was 2 p.m. They wanted coffee and a meal, so they ended up right back at Hippopotamus, the restaurant where they'd met a mere 24 hours before. He said, I need coffee. Do you want coffee? Yes, but I want to eat, so I guess I'll have to wait, right? Of course not, he said. Then yes, please. Coffee with milk. 2 coffees with milk, he said in French to their waiter. And we'd like to order something to eat. The waiter left 2 menus and went on his way. Why did you think you couldn't order coffee? Because when I first moved to Paris, a waiter shouted at me for ordering coffee before my meal. It was in the afternoon, like now, but I had just arrived in France. I had jet lag, and it was the first meal of the day for me. Were you in a cafe, a restaurant, or a little cafe? Okay, first of all, the guy was. He was a bully. Furthermore, if any waiter in France ever shouts at you, shout back and he'll do as you want. I didn't know the rules. And at the time, I didn't speak any French. It doesn't matter. Shout in English. They'll get the message. Some of these guys don't speak English, but they understand more than they let on. Well, I have no trouble shouting. I'm an American. We speak louder than the French anyway. And I'm an actor with a loud stage voice. And the French don't like shouting, right? Oh, we don't. I'd probably scare the wits out of him. Definitely, Batiste laughed. Anyway, it's breakfast for us, but I want to clarify something. It would be different if we were sitting down to formally dine for lunch or dinner because the strong taste of coffee interferes with the taste buds, which would affect the taste of the food and wine in an adverse way. That's why we only drink coffee after and not before or during a meal. In a casual place like this, though, it's none of any waiter's business when we drink coffee. Waiting tables is a boring job for them, and they like to entertain themselves at the customer's expense, especially with a foreign female on her own. Like a game? Something like that, to amuse themselves by intimidating someone, possibly. Most excellent lesser in the shenanigans of male French waiters, Professor. She leaned in and kissed him. They had coffee and lunch. She looked on while Baptiste savored an enormous banana split. She picked up her spoon to share a bite, and he stopped her. I don't share dessert, he said. You're kidding. I'm serious. It's something to do with my childhood. I can't believe it, she said, setting her spoon down. I'll order something for you if you like. No, I rarely eat it anyway, except for a bite. But thanks. I don't mean to be rude. Just kind of surprised me, that's all. Sorry. You never shared dessert? I haven't. Wow, that's deep. It is, he said, more than you could ever know. When he finished, they each ordered coffee again, and he said, Do you have plans or would you like to spend the day together? I don't expect you to, but I need to shop for clothes and I'd like your opinion. It would be excellent if you'd come with me. I'd love to. Formidable, he said. The coffee arrived and he gave her a kiss. I can only wear suits at work and I need some new ones. I also need shirts and maybe shoes. Today I require a visit to Kenzo. Require? She said. I only wear French designers. Designers? I'm an actress and I don't even wear designers. Not often, anyway. I'm obsessed, I'm afraid, he laughed. Kenzo doesn't sound like a French name. He was born in Japan and moved to France for his fashion career. He's my favorite. Where Baptiste needed to go was on the other side of town, across the river on the right bank. They decided to walk. They stayed off the big boulevards and took small streets, proceeding through the Luxembourg Gardens and along more back streets to Boulevard Saint-Michel. When they passed the Sorbonne, he pointed it out and told her it was the university where he had gotten his postgraduate degrees. They continued on, crossing the Seine to the Ile de la Cité and through the Square Saint-Jean, a romantic little park behind Notre Dame. He looked at the cathedral. How long do you think those clocks have been there? Where? Antoinette said. There. She looked up to see 2 identical dormer clocks set into opposite sides of the roof line. Baptiste said, There are 2 here and 2 on the front. I have no idea. I've never noticed them before. I always notice and wonder about it every time I pass. If you're so curious, look it up. You're the professor. Can't be too difficult to find out. Continuing across a small bridge to the Ile Saint Louis, they stopped to have ice cream. He'd warned her he wouldn't share, so she got one of her own. They walked on to the Louvre, across the grounds, past its pyramid, and lingered in the Tuileries garden. It was getting late, and when they crossed through the courtyard at the Palais Royal, they started to run, afraid the Kenzo store would close before they got there. But then he abruptly stopped. She passed him, and he yelled, "Wait!" She stopped, out of breath. "What is it?" "This reminds me of something. A movie. What's the famous American movie that was shot here? I'm sure you know. A woman is being chased. I remember these pillars with black and white stripes. It's a Hitchcock movie." "Oh, yeah, she said. "Not Hitchcock, but a similar style. It's," Antoinette thought for a moment. "Audrey Hepburn?" "Yes," Baptiste said, encouraging her. "Cary Grant is in it?" Yes. "Is it Charade?" "That's the one." He embraced her. It was very romantic, a love story. He kissed her. "You're romantic. So are you." They kissed again. "Stop seducing me," he said. "The shop is going to close." They ran the rest of the way and arrived at the Kenzo store 20 minutes before closing time.
I'm so glad you read that. I like that scene. I love the Paris, but I also really love that period of time. It's her and Baptiste are out in the real world, and they're in that bubble of love.
Yes, it is.
Claudette, without giving it away, Lena Horne kind of pops up in this book. What does Lena Horne mean to you?
She means a lot to me. First of all, she reminds me a lot of my mom. I mean, she was a star. My mom was no star. She was an activist in the civil rights movement, and she was strong. In the days when beautiful women of color in Hollywood were, they had a hard time. And she was fair skinned, and as an activist, her skin could have been coal black because she was so fierce in the defense and representation of African American people. So that means a lot to me. And she was born and grew up in the same time as my mom. My mom was born and grew up in the South. Lena Horne was born and grew up in New York. So what? I mean, they had just as many struggles. There was segregation in New York. It's not widely known, but there was. I mean, she was born in 1917. So there was a lot of discrimination. I have a girlfriend who's an actor whose mom was a white German Jewish woman with blonde hair and blue eyes, and her father was a black Jamaican man. And my friend is mixed race, and she's brown like me, and grew up in New York City. And she said her mother, and she would go places, and they wouldn't want to let the daughter in because she's brown.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, and this is New York, like in the 60s and 70s. And it's crazy. And it sounds almost as bad as apartheid in South Africa when I hear, stories about that.
Women, especially women of color, were also not given their props for being blacklisted during that time. It wasn't just writers. As screenwriters, we think of the blacklist.
Yes.
But she had the FBI following her all the time because of activism.
Yes, as they
So,
did Billie Holiday. As they did Billie Holiday. They
right.
even said, "Strange fruit, don't you ever sing that song." The government told her, "If you sing that song, we're going to arrest you." The song. She couldn't perform the song. Strange fruit.
Yes.
And it's in the movie, Billie Holiday, the USA versus Billie Holiday, which I hate that title. I think they could have had a better title. More people would have seen the movie. It's a great movie. It's a great movie. I loved it. And so Lena Horne is on a pedestal for me because of her activism, because of her talent, because of her refusal to back down, because of her independence, because of her self-sufficiency and the decisions that she made in her life. In the story, Antoinette has a best friend who's gay, a man. And I got the idea from Lena Horne, who said that when people were asking her later in her career to perform more and make another album? She said, no, I don't want to. This is fine. I'm fine. I'm doing fine. I'm doing what I'm doing, until her best friend asked her. And her best friend was Billy Strayhorn, who collaborated a lot with Duke Ellington. And she said, when he asked me, I said, I'll do it for you. Or it could have been, he could have been dead already, but she said, somehow she said, I'll do it for Billy. He was my best friend.
Oh.
And I sort of decided that Antoinette's best friend would be a gay man because of that.
Now, Antoinette is alone in the world. Her parents are gone and she has no siblings. You dealt with loneliness and identity head on in the book. And, I applaud you for that. But it's also it's a big ask for a first time writer. Those are not concrete, like she's looking for the treasure at the bottom of the sea. Where'd that all come from for you?
The loneliness is personal. I'm an only child, and two of my past partners have been only children, my ex-husband and other men I've dated. And it's kind of different for us. It's something that's not that common. When it wasn't that common when I grew up, nor my partners, because we're all around the same age. However, you learn to deal with the loneliness. My family, my mom had sisters and brothers, but they lived far away from us. And I only got to see my cousins, my closest cousins, once a year for 2 weeks, when we'd go see that family and that part of the family in Memphis. And they were the closest family to us. And I love my cousins, but I didn't grow up with them. And I see them now occasionally, and it's like nothing ever changed, because we still love seeing each other when we're together. It's like no time had passed, but it has. And it was lonely. So I learned to cultivate my friendships. I was married, then divorced, then married again, then divorced. Then I was single for many, many years. And it was very lonely. And I was working. I was financially secure. I'd take trips to Paris. I never had a relationship per se in Paris. I had lovers here and there. And so it was lonely. And I started travel because it fed my spirit, because that connection I could get. I couldn't get a partner to connect. I connected with my friends, but I really longed for that special, super intimate connection with a partner. And that's my experience. That was from me.
That alone is brave. We don't like to think of loneliness. I just think as a society, we don't know how to handle loneliness. And I think it's a big issue.
I think you're right. And I wanted Antoinette to experience loneliness because I wanted to make the case for the fact that no matter how beautiful you are, no matter how successful you are, we are all wanting the same thing, which is being seen, being heard, being loved. That's the main thing. That's the thing of life, loving and being loved. It's what we all
Yes.
want. The main characters in the story, they're all successful. I wanted them to all be successful in what they did. And of course, it's a fantasy. So there's a billionaire and there's a Frenchman. He's successful and she's successful, but they all want the same thing, regardless of what they have in terms of material things.
If you had to describe Antoinette in 3 words, what would they be?
Ooh, self-sufficient. Well, maybe hardworking instead of self-sufficient, curious and loving.
If you had to describe yourself in 3 words, would it be?
Oh, you're a tricky one. I am curious. I would say I am curious and interested is kind of the same thing. I'm very interested in learning new things. Adventurous. I'm adventurous.
Yes, you are.
Not with sports or physical things or scary things, with life adventures. I like new experiences that way. So adventurous in that way. Yeah, curious, adventurous, and loving.
Claudette, if our listeners only have one day in Paris, what should they do?
Well, I would say taking one of the giant barge boats. One of the companies I like is called Bateau Mouche, Bateaux, Mouche, Mouches. And they do a boat ride. It's about an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes. It goes down the Seine River and back up the Seine River and turns around and comes back to where you started. And it passes most of the famous monuments and museums and gives a person great orientation. And that boat ride is beautiful in daylight and at night when the buildings are beautifully lit at nighttime. I go day and night. I mean, it's one of my favorite things. And it gives you orientation, and you can see how beautiful Paris is. It's kind of like they did at the Olympics. If anybody watched the 2024 opening ceremonies, and they were up and down the River Seine.
Yes.
Everything is up and down the River Seine in that same small area where this boat ride takes you. You could do a daytime one and a nighttime one, and it's fabulous. It's not the boat that you get on and off, so don't get on the hop on, hop off unless you want to just use it like a bus. This is just a tour boat, and it's awesome. And then I would say they could go, if they're a museum fan, they could go to one of the museums. Going to more than one is a lot because they're so dense with beauty. Pick only one or two if you have only one day, because the architecture itself is overwhelmingly gorgeous. And my favorites are the Orsay, Musée d'Orsay, the Orangerie Museum, and of course the Louvre, but that's awesome. And then stop at a cafe, preferably on an outdoor terrace, weather permitting, for a glass or a cup of something, and watch the people. It's because they're tourists from all over the world. They're Parisians, there's French people who are tourists, and everybody wants to see Paris. So I would say that.
Brilliant. Love that. That is the Claudette Wells tour. I highly recommend you follow those instructions. Claudette, why don't we give away one of your books?
Sure, I'd love to do that.
Okay, the first person to write the Writers Hangout podcast at gmail.com and let us know what your favorite French food is, we will send you a copy of Fine French Dogs.
We will indeed. And I want people to know too, the book is a fast read. It is a romp. I mean, you will read it in a day or two or on a plane ride. It's fun and easy to read with a lot of heart.
It is a fun romp. You're with so much heart and really poignant underpinnings that I think just makes it very special. Hey, could you please tell our listeners where they can get Fine French Dogs and your social media?
Sure, of course. You can find the book, Fine French Dogs, by doing an Amazon search, Fine French Dogs by Claudette Wells. And it's available currently in paperback and as an ebook. The audiobook is in the making. It's not ready yet. Fine French Dogs is currently available, Amazon.com in the US or Amazon in whichever country you're in. And yeah, I need reviews. Sandy, you have to write a review since you read the book.
Yes, I will write a review now because I have read it cover to cover.
Yes.
And yeah, come on, writers, get up there, get the book, read it, leave a review. And when you're leaving a review for Claudette, also leave a review for the Writers Hangout. It really helps us getting our voices out to you guys.
Also, my Instagram is at I am Claudette Wells, and I'm on Facebook.
Claudette, thank you again for joining us on the Writers Hangout. I really enjoyed our conversation.
I always love talking to you, Sandy. And we did that Mother's Day one, which was awesome a few years ago. And now to have you ask me to come back and talk about my first novel is just such a treat. Thank you so much.
And that's a wrap for the Writers Hangout. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Your positive feedback will help us keep the show going so we can continue bringing you more future episodes. Remember, keep writing. The world needs your stories. The Writers Hangout is sponsored by the Page International Screenwriting Awards with executive producer Kristin Overn, producers Sandy Adomaitis and myself, Terry Sampson. And our music is composed by Ethan Stoller.